Dr. Harker adjusted his glasses and glanced at the clock on the wall of his Spartan office. The small, digital display read 7:45, and the sterile hum of fluorescent lights above him marked the beginning of another day at Site 19. Harker's life had become a series of meticulously arranged routines, each one a safeguard against the chaos that loomed just beyond the secure doors of the SCP Foundation. His desk was a testament to his ordered mind, neatly stacked files, a coffee mug emblazoned with the Foundation's insignia, and a framed photo of his wife and daughter, a quiet reminder of the world outside the containment site. He took a sip from the mug, the familiar bitter taste of black coffee grounding him in the here and now. Harker was a man of science, a researcher whose methodical approach had earned him respect among his peers. He thrived in the predictability of data, the clarity of empirical evidence. Today, however, something felt off. He couldn't quite place it, but an unease had settled in the pit of his stomach, gnawing at the edges of his mind. As he logged into his terminal, his fingers danced over the keyboard with practiced ease. The screen flickered to life, displaying the SCP Foundation's secure database. Rows of classified files scrolled past, each one a testament to the organization's grim duty to secure, contain, and protect. Harker's eyes scanned the list, searching for the day's assignments. It wasn't long before a notification popped up, drawing his attention to a new file assignment. The header read SCP-001 Eyes Only. Harker frowned. SCP-001 was an anomaly shrouded in secrecy, a file whispered about in hushed tones among the Foundation staff. Few had clearance to access it, and fewer still spoke of what they found. Curiosity piqued, Harker hesitated for a moment before clicking the link. The screen went dark for a heartbeat before a series of documents and reports appeared, each marked with the highest level of clearance. His breath hitched as he read the first line. SCP-001 is classified as the SCP Foundation itself. The mundane hum of the office seemed to fade, replaced by the pounding of his heart in his ears. He leaned back in his chair, trying to process what he was seeing. The SCP Foundation, the very organization dedicated to containing anomalies, was classified as an anomaly. The implications were staggering, and for a moment, the orderly world Harker had built around himself threatened to crumble. He forced himself to breathe, to focus. The coffee, now cold, was forgotten on the desk as he began to read through the documents, his mind racing with questions. How could the Foundation be an SCP? What did it mean for everything they had done, everything they continued to do? Harker's eyes flicked to the photo of his family. He had to understand this, not just for the Foundation, but for them. Whatever secrets SCP-001 held, he would uncover them. He was a man of science, after all, and the answers were out there, waiting to be found. With renewed determination, Harker delved into the enigmatic file, unaware that this was only the beginning of a journey that would challenge everything he believed about the world and his place within it. Jonathan found himself unable to shake the implications of what he had discovered. The notion that the SCP Foundation, his very workplace, was classified as an anomaly gnawed at him. Each word he had read played over and over in his mind, like an insidious mantra. Today, as he walked the sterile, white-walled corridors of Site 19, everything seemed to have a hidden layer of meaning, a cryptic subtext just waiting to be deciphered. He made his way to the research archives, the echo of his footsteps a constant reminder of the isolation that often came with his line of work. Harker had always been a man who thrived on puzzles, on the thrill of uncovering the unknown. But this was something altogether different. The Foundation was supposed to be the solver of mysteries, not the mystery itself. His keycard buzzed against the scanner, and the heavy door to the archives slid open with a pneumatic hiss. Inside, rows upon rows of neatly categorized files and digital records awaited him. Harker's fingers itched with anticipation as he approached a terminal. He entered his credentials, and the secure database welcomed him with the familiar interface he had navigated countless times before. Harker's eyes were drawn to SCP-001 once more. He hesitated only briefly before accessing the file again. diving deeper into the layers of documentation. The more he read, the more intrigued he became. The reports were vague, filled with redacted sections and references to events and entities that seemed impossible to verify. Each document was a piece of a puzzle that seemed to have no edges, no clear boundary to define its scope. One report detailed an ancient manuscript, purportedly dating back millennia, which spoke of a secret society devoted to containing the unknowable. Another mentioned a series of cryptic messages intercepted from a parallel dimension, each one hinting at the Foundation's self-referential nature. Harker's curiosity was ignited. The pieces, though scattered and incomplete, began to form a tantalizing pattern. He leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples as he tried to piece it all together. The Foundation was more than just a repository for anomalies, it was an anomaly itself. But what did that mean? And why had this information been kept so secret? His mind buzzed with possibilities, each one more outlandish than the last. Harker's thoughts were interrupted by the arrival of his colleague, Dr. Emily Carter. She was a no-nonsense researcher with a penchant for practical solutions, and her presence was often a grounding influence. "You look like you've seen a ghost," Emily said, her eyes narrowing as she took in Harker's disheveled appearance. Harker offered a wry smile. "In a manner of speaking, I have. I've been looking into SCP-001. Emily's expression shifted from curiosity to concern. "SCP-001? That's some heavy stuff, Jonathan. What did you find?" "Everything and nothing," he replied, leaning forward. "It's the Foundation itself, or at least that's part of it. There are hints and fragments, but nothing concrete. It's like chasing a shadow." Emily pulled up a chair, her interest clearly piqued. "Let's take a look. Maybe two heads are better than one." Together, they pored over the documents, sharing theories and hypotheses. The hours slipped by unnoticed, the outside world fading as they delved deeper into the enigma of SCP-001. The more they uncovered, the more questions arose, each one leading them further down the rabbit hole. Harker couldn't help but feel a thrill of excitement mixed with a creeping sense of dread. They were uncovering something monumental, something that could shake the very foundations of the SCP Foundation. But with each answer came a new mystery, a new layer of complexity that defied simple explanation. As the day turned to night, and the sterile lights of the archive cast long shadows across the room, Harker realized that this was only the beginning. The truth about SCP-001 was out there, buried beneath layers of secrecy and misdirection. And he was determined to uncover it, no matter the cost. Dr. Jonathan Harker's request for higher clearance had been a long shot, a Hail Mary thrown into the labyrinthine bureaucracy of the SCP Foundation. So when his access was approved with startling swiftness, it left him with more questions than answers. The O5 Council rarely moved quickly, and when they did, it was never without cause. Harker sat at his desk, staring at the confirmation email on his monitor. The sterile, cold light of the screen contrasted sharply with the warm, inviting glow of the lamp beside him. He had grown used to the hum of fluorescent lights and the distant, mechanical thrum of Site-19, but today, everything felt different. The air was thick with the weight of hidden truths, and Harker's heart pounded with a mixture of anticipation and dread. He took a deep breath, steeling himself before entering the new access codes. The secure database blinked, and a fresh set of files appeared, each one stamped with the ominous designation SCP-001. His fingers hovered over the keyboard for a moment. Then he dove in, opening the first document. The language was dense, filled with technical jargon and heavily redacted sections, but beneath the obfuscation, a chilling narrative began to emerge. The SCP Foundation was not just an organization, it was a containment measure in and of itself. The Foundation's structure, its protocols, its very existence was designed to keep something at bay. But what? Harker leaned closer, his eyes scanning the screen. There were references to a primordial entity, an ancient force that predated human civilization. The Foundation's founders had discovered this entity, and in their wisdom, or madness, had created the Foundation to contain it. The implications were staggering. If the Foundation ever ceased to exist, the entity would be unleashed. A sense of foreboding settled over him. The Foundation's motto, secure, contain, protect, took on a new, sinister meaning. They weren't just protecting humanity from anomalies, they were protecting reality itself from something far worse. His concentration was interrupted by a soft chime. A message notification. Harker opened it, finding a brief, encrypted communique from the O5 Council. Dr. Harker, your investigation into SCP-001 has been noted. Proceed with caution. The truth you seek carries great risk. Harker's pulse quickened. The O5 Council's attention was rarely a good thing, and their warning was both vague and ominous. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched, that every keystroke, every click was being monitored. Undeterred, he continued his research, diving deeper into the archives. He uncovered transcripts of interviews with the Foundation's founders, detailing their discovery of the entity and their desperate measures to contain it. There were references to ancient texts and lost civilizations, all pointing to the same horrifying conclusion: the Foundation was a prison, and the world outside was the cage's final wall. Harker's mind raced. If the Foundation itself was an SCP, what did that mean for its staff? For the thousands of researchers, agents, and personnel who dedicated their lives to its mission? Were they merely pawns in a cosmic game, pieces in a puzzle they could never fully understand? The thought was both exhilarating and terrifying. Harker felt a strange kinship with those early founders, a connection across time forged by shared purpose and peril. They had stared into the abyss and built an institution to hold back the darkness. Now he was peering into that same void, seeking answers to questions that had haunted the Foundation for centuries. The hours slipped away as Harker lost himself in the documents. He read about containment breaches that defied explanation, anomalies that seemed to respond to the Foundation's very existence. Each new piece of information added to the growing sense of unease, the feeling that he was uncovering secrets not meant for mortal minds. Finally, he leaned back in his chair, exhausted but resolute. The truth about SCP-001 was beginning to take shape, a dark and twisted tapestry woven from fear, power, and sacrifice. Harker knew he was on the brink of something monumental, something that could change everything he knew about the Foundation and his place within it. The path ahead was fraught with danger, but he had come too far to turn back now. With a final glance at the encrypted message from the O5 Council, Harker steeled himself for the journey ahead. The answers were out there, buried beneath layers of secrecy and shadow, and he would find them, no matter the cost. Dr. Harker's eyes blurred from hours of staring at his screen. The deeper he delved into SCP-001, the more surreal and fragmented the world seemed to become. He rubbed his temples, trying to banish the creeping fatigue. It was then, as he sat alone in the dim glow of his office, that he found it the document that would change everything. The file was old, its edges yellowed with digital decay, but it bore the unmistakable seal of the O5 Council. As Harker began to read, the words on the screen seemed to pulse with an eerie light. The document was a memo dated several decades ago, detailing a classified meeting of the Council. The subject line was simple and stark: the nature of SCP-001. He felt a shiver run down his spine as he read the opening lines. The memo spoke of the Foundation's origins in terms that bordered on the mythic. The founders had encountered something beyond comprehension, an entity that defied the natural laws of the universe. They had named it SCP-001, but that name was a mere placeholder, a way to categorize the uncategorizable. The memo detailed the containment protocols, the establishment of the Foundation itself. Harker's breath caught in his throat as he read about the intricate layers of deception and control. The SCP Foundation was a self-referential anomaly, a Mobius strip of containment designed to mask the true nature of SCP-001. The Foundation's primary directive was not to contain anomalies, but to contain itself, to prevent the knowledge of SCP-001 from spreading. He felt a cold sweat break out on his forehead. The implications were staggering. The very act of researching SCP-001 was a containment breach. The Foundation's existence was a paradox, a fragile balance between knowledge and ignorance. If the true nature of SCP-001 were ever fully understood, it would unravel the Foundation, and with it, reality itself. The memo continued, detailing how the Founders had created a series of false SCP-001 designations to obscure the truth. Each one was a red herring, a way to mislead those who sought the ultimate secret. The real SCP-001 was the Foundation's very existence, a containment measure so perfect that even those within it could not see the bars of their own cage. Harker's hands trembled as he finished reading. The room seemed to close in around him, the walls pressing in with the weight of his newfound knowledge. He had to tell someone, had to share this revelation, but who could he trust? The O5 Council had warned him, had granted him access knowing the risks. They were watching, waiting to see what he would do. His mind raced with possibilities. If the Foundation was a containment measure, then every anomaly, every SCP was part of that measure. The breaches, the chaos, it was all part of a larger design, a way to keep the true nature of SCP-001 hidden. The thought was maddening, a labyrinth with no exit. A knock at his door startled him, pulling him from his spiraling thoughts. Dr. Emily Carter stood in the doorway, her face a mask of concern. "Jonathan, are you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." He swallowed hard, trying to find his voice. "Emily, you need to see this. It's SCP-001. She entered the room, closing the door behind her. As she read the memo, her expression shifted from curiosity to shock, mirroring the journey Harker had just taken. "This can't be real," she whispered, her voice trembling. "The Foundation. It's an SCP." Harker nodded, his mind still reeling. "It's real, Emily, and it's bigger than anything we've ever dealt with. If this gets out." She met his gaze, her eyes wide with fear and determination. "Then we need to make sure it doesn't. But first we need to understand it. Completely." Harker felt a surge of resolve. They were on the brink of something monumental, something that could either save the Foundation or destroy it. The path ahead was fraught with danger, but together they would face it. The truth about SCP-001 was out there, and they would uncover it, no matter the cost. As they delved back into the documents, the room seemed to darken around them, the shadows deepening with the weight of their discovery. The Foundation was a cage, and they were its keepers, bound to its secrets by duty and by fear. And somewhere, in the heart of that labyrinth, the truth awaited them, a revelation that could reshape their world. Jonathan Harker sat in the dimly lit archives, the screen's glow casting eerie shadows on his face. Each document he unearthed seemed to draw him deeper into a labyrinth of secrets. The reality of SCP-001 gnawed at the edges of his consciousness, a constant whisper in the back of his mind. Emily Carter sat beside him, her face etched with the same determination that drove him. They had spent days combing through files, their shared obsession with SCP-001 drawing them closer to a truth that felt both imminent and impossibly out of reach. "Look at this," Emily said, pointing to a transcript of an interview with one of the Foundation's original members. The man, identified only as Dr. Redacted, spoke of the early days with a reverence that bordered on the fanatical. "We were chosen," the transcript read, "not to discover anomalies, but to create the means of their containment. The Foundation is a crucible, a necessary evil to hold back the end of all things." Harker's eyes narrowed. "A necessary evil," he muttered. "They knew what they were creating. They knew it was a containment measure for something beyond our comprehension. Emily nodded, her fingers tapping anxiously on the desk. But what exactly is SCP-001? What are they so desperate to contain that it requires an entire organization as its prison? They exchanged a look, the unspoken understanding passing between them. They needed more information, more context, more pieces to this sprawling, terrifying puzzle. Harker leaned back, closing his eyes for a moment. The hum of the fluorescent lights above seemed louder, more insistent. We need to go deeper. There has to be more than just these documents. What about physical archives, artifacts? Emily's eyes lit up. There's a restricted section in the sub-basement. I've heard rumors, but I've never been there. We might find something physical, something tangible that can give us a clearer picture. It was a risk. The sub-basement was off-limits to all but the highest clearance levels, and their investigation had already drawn the O5 Council's attention. But they had come too far to stop now. "Let's do it," Harker said, standing up. "We need to know." The journey to the sub-basement was a silent one, their footsteps echoing in the empty corridors. The deeper they went, the more oppressive the atmosphere became, as if the very air was saturated with the weight of the secrets kept here. At the entrance to the restricted section, Harker swiped his keycard. The door opened with a low, ominous creak. Inside, the room was cold, the air thick with the scent of old paper and something metallic, almost like blood. Rows of shelves stretched out before them, filled with ancient tomes, dusty files, and peculiar objects encased in glass. Harker felt a chill run down his spine. This was a place of power, a repository of the Foundation's darkest secrets. They began their search, sifting through the shelves with a mixture of reverence and urgency. It was Emily who found it, a leather-bound journal, its pages yellowed with age but meticulously preserved. "This is it," she whispered, opening the journal. This belonged to one of the founders. The journal detailed the early days of the Foundation, the discovery of SCP-001, and the desperate measures taken to contain it. Harker's hands trembled as he read the final entry. "We have done what we must," the entry read. "The Foundation is the cage, and we are its keepers. The entity is bound, but its influence seeps through the cracks. We must remain vigilant. We must never forget that we are part of the containment." Harker's mind raced. The entity, whatever it was not entirely contained. Its influence was subtle, insidious, affecting those within the Foundation in ways they couldn't fully comprehend. "We're not just keepers," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "We're part of the containment. Our actions, our very thoughts, everything is tied to SCP-001. Emily looked at him, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and determination. "Then we need to be even more careful. We need to understand our role, our place in this system." Harker nodded. The path ahead was clearer now, but infinitely more dangerous. They were not just uncovering secrets, they were part of them, woven into the fabric of SCP-001's containment. As they left the sub-basement, the weight of their discovery pressed down on them. They were no longer just researchers, they were participants in a grand, terrifying experiment. The truth about SCP-001 was beginning to take shape, but it was a truth that could shatter the very foundations of their reality. And so they pressed on, driven by the need to understand, to uncover the final pieces of the puzzle. The answers were out there, buried beneath layers of secrecy and fear, and they would find them, no matter the cost. The subterranean archives had cast a long shadow over Jonathan Harker's mind. As he and Emily Carter returned to their offices, the unease settled deeper into their bones. The revelations they'd uncovered about SCP-01 were disturbing, but the nagging sense of something greater, something unearthly, lingered at the edge of their understanding. Harker sat at his desk, the dim glow of the monitor casting long shadows across the room. The air felt thick with anticipation, every creak of the building amplified in the silence. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were on the precipice of something profound and terrifying. Emily's voice broke the silence. "Jonathan, take a look at this." He turned to see her holding a weathered map, the edges frayed and the ink faded. She spread it out on the desk, revealing a detailed layout of Site 19, but with additional markings, annotations that seemed to indicate hidden areas and connections. "This map was in the journal," she explained. "It shows parts of the site we didn't even know existed. Look at this." She pointed to a section marked with strange symbols. "This could be where SCP-001's influence is strongest." Harker's pulse quickened. The symbols were reminiscent of the ancient texts he had read, the ones that spoke of primordial entities and forgotten realms. The thought that SCP-001's influence could have physical manifestations within the Foundation was both intriguing and terrifying. "We need to explore these areas," he said, his voice tinged with urgency. "If SCP-001's influence is here, we need to understand it." They moved quickly, gathering what they needed for the exploration. The corridors of Site 19 felt different now, each turn and shadow hiding potential threats. As they made their way to the first hidden section, Harker couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, that unseen eyes were tracking their every move. The first location was a disused wing of the facility, long abandoned and forgotten. The air was cold, a stark contrast to the rest of the site. As they entered, their flashlights cut through the darkness, revealing walls covered in strange, otherworldly symbols. The patterns were chaotic yet methodical, as if they were meant to convey a message beyond human comprehension. "Do you feel that?" Emily whispered. "It's like the air is alive." Harker nodded, his breath visible in the cold air. The atmosphere was charged, a palpable energy that seemed to hum just below the surface. They moved cautiously, examining the symbols and trying to piece together their meaning. Suddenly, Harker's flashlight flickered, casting erratic shadows that danced across the walls. He felt a sudden pressure in his head, a low hum that grew louder, more insistent. He staggered, clutching his temples as the noise reached a crescendo. "Jonathan," Emily's voice cut through the noise, grounding him. He looked up to see her pointing at a central symbol, larger and more intricate than the others. It seemed to pulse with a life of its own, the lines shifting and changing as if alive. "This is it," she said, her voice barely audible over the hum. "This is the heart of SCP-001's influence." Harker approached the symbol, his mind racing. The journal's warnings echoed in his head, the Founder's desperate measures to contain the entity. He reached out, his fingers brushing the surface of the symbol. The moment he made contact, the hum stopped, replaced by a deafening silence. Visions flooded his mind, ancient landscapes, impossible geometries, beings of immense power and malice. He saw the Founders, their faces etched with fear and determination, performing the rituals that would create the Foundation. They were not just scientists, they were wardens, keepers of a terrible secret. He pulled back, gasping for breath. The connection was severed, but the knowledge remained. SCP-001 was not just an entity, it was a nexus, a focal point for realities and dimensions. The Foundation was both prison and guardian, its very existence a barrier against the encroaching darkness. Emily steadied him, her eyes wide with understanding. "We're not just dealing with anomalies," she said. "We're part of a much larger structure, a multiverse of containment." Harker nodded, the weight of their discovery pressing down on him. The Foundation's purpose was clearer now, but the path ahead was fraught with danger. They had glimpsed the true nature of SCP-001, but there was so much more to uncover, so much more to understand. As they left the disused wing, the shadows seemed to close in behind them, the air once again heavy with the secrets they carried. Harker knew they were on the brink of something monumental, something that could change the very fabric of their reality. And with each step they took, the unease grew, a constant reminder of the unearthly connections that bound them to SCP-001. The answers were out there, hidden in the darkest corners of the Foundation. And they would find them, no matter the cost. The halls of Site-19 were awash in a cacophony of alarms. Red lights flashed, casting eerie shadows that danced and writhed like living things. Dr. Harker sprinted down the corridor, his heart pounding in his chest. He clutched his radio, its frantic chatter a background noise to the chaos unfolding around him. "This is not a drill," the intercom blared. "Containment breach in sectors C, D, and E. All personnel to emergency stations." Emily Carter appeared beside him, her face pale but resolute. "This has to be connected to SCP-001, she shouted over the din. "It's too much of a coincidence." Harker nodded, his mind racing. The breach was massive, unprecedented in scope. Containment failures were part of the job, but this felt different, coordinated, almost purposeful. They rounded a corner and skidded to a halt. Ahead of them, a containment door had been torn open, its thick metal twisted and warped. "Look out," Emily screamed, pulling Harker back, just as a creature lunged from the shadows. It was a twisted mass of sinew and bone, a grotesque amalgamation of several CPs. Harker fired his weapon, the bullets barely slowing the monstrosity. Emily activated a portable containment device, and with a flash of light, the creature was trapped within a shimmering field. "We need to get to the control room," Harker said, panting. "If we can re-establish containment protocols, we might be able to stop this." They pushed on, the facility around them descending into a nightmare. Creatures of every imaginable form roamed the corridors, attacking personnel and destroying equipment. Harker couldn't shake the feeling that this was a test, an orchestrated event to challenge the very foundations of the SCP containment protocols. As they reached the control room, the scene was one of utter devastation. Consoles were smashed, screens flickered with static, and several technicians lay unconscious or worse. Harker rushed to the main terminal, his fingers flying over the keys. Come on," he muttered, trying to bypass the corrupted systems. Emily stood guard, her eyes scanning the room for any threats. The hum of the facility's generators was punctuated by distant explosions and the inhuman screams of the escaped anomalies. "I've got partial control," Harker said, his voice tight with concentration. "But it's not enough. We need to reset the primary containment grid." Emily's eyes widened. "That's in the central core. It's a death trap down there." "We don't have a choice," Harker replied, meeting her gaze. "If SCP-001's influence is behind this, we have to stop it at the source." They moved quickly, navigating the maze-like corridors to the central core. The deeper they went, the more oppressive the atmosphere became. The lights flickered, casting long, ominous shadows that seemed to follow them. Harker could feel the air growing colder, the very fabric of reality straining under the weight of the anomalies. As they approached the core, the ground shook with a violent tremor. The containment protocols had failed spectacularly, and the facility was on the brink of collapse. Harker and Emily entered the control chamber, a massive room filled with intricate machinery and a central console that controlled the containment grid. Emily worked on the console, her fingers a blur. "We've got one shot at this," she said, her voice steady despite the chaos around them. "If we can reboot the system, we can re-establish containment for most of the anomalies." Harker nodded, his eyes scanning the room. "Do it. I'll hold them off." The chamber doors burst open, and a horde of anomalies surged inside. Harker fired, his weapon's muzzle flashing in the dim light. He could see the fearsome forms of SCPs he had only read about, their twisted shapes a testament to the horrors they contained. Emily's voice rang out. "Almost there. Just a few more seconds." A massive creature lunged at Harker, its maw wide open, revealing rows of serrated teeth. He barely managed to sidestep, firing a point-blank shot that staggered the beast. But there were too many of them, and he was running out of ammunition. "Got it." Emily shouted. "Rebooting now." The central console lit up, and a wave of energy pulsed through the room. The anomalies froze, their forms flickering as the containment protocols re-engaged. One by one, they were pulled back into their cells, the air around them shimmering with the power of the containment grid. Harker collapsed against the wall, his breath coming in ragged gasps. Emily joined him, her face streaked with sweat and grime. "We did it," she said, her voice a mix of relief and exhaustion. Harker nodded, but his mind was already racing ahead. The breach had been too coordinated, too purposeful. It was clear now that SCP-001's influence was growing, pushing the Foundation to its limits. They had survived this time, but the true battle was just beginning. "We need to understand SCP-001, he said, his voice grim, "before it's too late." Emily nodded, her eyes reflecting the same determination. They had seen the face of chaos and lived to tell the tale, but the real fight was far from over. Together they would uncover the secrets of SCP-001 and confront the entity that threatened to unravel their world. The containment breach had been a warning, a taste of the darkness that lay ahead. And as they prepared for the next phase of their investigation, Harker knew that the true test of their resolve was yet to come. The shadows were closing in, and the answers they sought were buried deep within the heart of the Foundation itself. Dr. Harker couldn't shake the feeling of impending doom. The containment breach had been a close call, but it was the calculated nature of the incident that gnawed at him. Someone, or something, was orchestrating these events, and the implications were chilling. Emily Carter sat across from him in the makeshift war room they had set up in the wake of the breach. The room was filled with hastily arranged equipment, maps, and documents detailing every anomaly they had encountered. The air was thick with tension, a constant reminder of the precariousness of their situation. "We need to find out who's behind this," Emily said, her voice low but determined. The breach wasn't a random occurrence. It was too precise, too targeted. Harker nodded, his mind racing. "Agreed. We need to dig deeper into the Foundation's internal records, look for any signs of manipulation or interference. Someone inside might be working against us." The prospect of internal betrayal was daunting, but Harker knew it was a possibility they had to consider. He accessed the Foundation's secure database, bypassing the standard protocols with the access codes he had obtained during his investigation into SCP-001. The deeper he went, the more he felt like he was walking a tightrope, each step fraught with danger. They worked in silence, the only sounds the occasional hum of the equipment and the rustle of paper. Harker's eyes scanned line after line of text, searching for any discrepancies, any anomalies within the anomalies. It was Emily who found the first clue. "Look at this," she said, pointing to a series of encrypted messages. "These are communications between high-level personnel, discussing something called Project Ouroboros." Harker's brow furrowed as he read the messages. The content was vague, filled with euphemisms and code words, but the intent was clear. Project Ouroboros was a covert operation within the Foundation, and it had direct ties to SCP-001. "This could be it," Harker said, his voice tinged with excitement and dread. "Whatever Project Ouroboros is, it's connected to the breaches in SCP-001. We need to find out more." They followed the digital trail, accessing hidden files and encrypted communications. The pieces began to form a disturbing picture. Project Ouroboros was an initiative to manipulate the anomalies for a purpose that was still unclear, but it involved key members of the Foundation's leadership. "It's a hidden agenda," Emily said, her voice barely a whisper. "They're using the anomalies to achieve some kind of goal. But what?" As they delved deeper, they uncovered reports of experiments that defied ethical boundaries, using SCPs to test the limits of reality itself. The O5 Council, the highest authority within the Foundation, was directly involved. Harker felt a cold knot form in his stomach. "They're playing with fire," he muttered. "If they lose control, it could mean the end of everything." Emily nodded, her face pale. "We need to confront them, but we can't do it alone. We need allies, people we can trust." Finding allies within the Foundation was no small task. The culture of secrecy and compartmentalization meant that trust was a rare commodity, but Harker knew of a few colleagues who might be sympathetic to their cause. They contacted Dr. Marcus Hale, a senior researcher known for his integrity, and Dr. Sarah Kim, a security specialist with a reputation for being incorruptible. Hale and Kim arrived at the war room, their faces grim but resolute. As Harker and Emily laid out their findings, the newcomers' expressions shifted from shock to determination. "This is bigger than any of us," Hale said, his voice steady. "If the O5 Council is behind this, we need to expose them. But we have to be careful. One wrong move, and they'll shut us down." Kim nodded. "We need evidence, irrefutable proof of their involvement. And we need to be ready for whatever comes next." The plan was set. They would gather evidence, expose the hidden agenda, and confront the O5 Council. It was a dangerous path, fraught with risks, but they had no choice. The integrity of the Foundation and the safety of the world depended on it. As they prepared to launch their investigation, Harker couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The shadows seemed to close in around them, the air thick with unseen menace. But they pressed on, driven by the need for truth and justice. The hidden agenda was out there, lurking in the darkness, and they would bring it to light. No matter the cost, they would uncover the truth behind Project Ouroboros and the true nature of SCP-001. The stakes had never been higher, and the consequences of failure were too dire to contemplate. But they were ready, and they would not back down. The battle for the soul of the Foundation had begun, and there was no turning back. Dr. Jonathan Harker could feel his grip on reality slipping. The deeper he and Emily delved into Project Ouroboros, the more fragmented his thoughts became. It was as if the very act of uncovering the truth was tearing at the fabric of his sanity. He rubbed his temples, trying to dispel the persistent headache that had become his constant companion. The war room, once a bastion of order and purpose, now felt claustrophobic and hostile. The maps and documents that had once guided their investigation now seemed like mocking reminders of the enormity of their task. Every shadow seemed to hold a threat, every whisper of air a portent of doom. "Jonathan, focus." Emily's voice broke through the haze, her tone firm but worried. "We need you." Harker blinked, forcing himself to concentrate. He looked at the faces of his colleagues, Emily, Marcus Hale, and Sarah Kim. They were counting on him. The weight of their trust was both a burden and a lifeline, anchoring him to reality. "I'm here," he said, his voice sounding distant even to his own ears. "Let's continue." They had gathered more evidence, encrypted communications, and recordings that tied the O5 Council to Project Ouroboros. The Council's agenda was more sinister than they had imagined. They were not just using the anomalies for experiments, they were attempting to harness SCP-001's power to manipulate reality itself. "This is madness," Hale said, his usually calm demeanor cracking. "They're risking everything. If they lose control..." Harker didn't need him to finish the sentence. The consequences were unthinkable. The very structure of reality could unravel, plunging the world into chaos. He felt a surge of anger and fear, emotions that seemed to magnify the growing cracks in his mental state. "We need to act now," Kim said, her eyes steely with determination. "We have enough evidence. We need to confront the Council and expose them before it's too late." Harker nodded, but even as he agreed, he felt a cold sweat break out on his forehead. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, that unseen eyes were tracking their every move. Paranoia gnawed at him, a relentless whisper in his mind. They moved quickly, assembling their evidence and planning their approach. But as they prepared to leave, Harker's vision blurred. and he staggered, clutching at a nearby table for support. Jonathan, Emily rushed to his side, her face etched with concern. "What's happening?" He shook his head, trying to clear the fog. "I don't know. It's like something is inside my head. I can't think straight." Hale looked grim. "It's SCP-001's influence. The closer we get to the truth, the more it affects us. We need to be careful." The journey to the O5 Council's chamber felt like a fever dream. The corridors of Site-19 twisted and warped, the familiar paths becoming nightmarish labyrinths. Harker's thoughts fragmented further, disjointed images and memories flashing before his eyes. They reached the chamber, the massive doors looming like a gateway to another world. As they entered, the members of the O5 Council turned to face them, their expressions inscrutable. "What is the meaning of this?" O51 demanded, his voice cold and authoritative. Harker stepped forward, his hands trembling. "We know about Project Ouroboros. We know what you're trying to do. This has to stop." The council members exchanged glances, and O51's expression darkened. "You have no idea what you're meddling with. The Foundation's existence is predicated on maintaining a delicate balance. Your actions threaten that balance." Emily stepped beside Harker, her voice strong and unwavering. "You're the ones threatening the balance. You're playing with forces you can't control. If SCP-001's influence continues to grow, it will destroy everything." The room seemed to pulse with a malevolent energy. Harker felt a pressure building in his skull, a relentless force pushing against his sanity. He could see the others struggling too, their faces twisted with the effort of resisting SCP-001's influence. O51's gaze bore into them. "You think you can stop this? You are mere pawns in a game far beyond your comprehension. The Foundation's purpose is to contain the uncontainable, to protect humanity from the unknown. Sometimes sacrifices must be made." Harker's vision blurred again, and he felt himself slipping. He reached out, grabbing Emily's hand as if it were a lifeline. We have to stop this, for all of us." The chamber erupted into chaos. Hale and Kim moved to secure the doors, preventing the council members from escaping. Emily pulled out a portable containment device, aiming it at the central console that controlled Project Ouroboros. Harker's mind fractured, reality and illusion blending into a nightmarish swirl. He could hear voices, whispers of doubt and fear, but he pushed through, focusing on the task at hand. "Do it, Emily," he shouted, his voice raw with desperation. She activated the device, and a blinding light filled the chamber. The console sparked and crackled, the containment protocols re-engaging. The pressure in Harker's head intensified, a sharp, unbearable pain that brought him to his knees. As the light faded, the council members were subdued, their plans thwarted. But Harker could feel the damage had been done. His mind was a shattered landscape, the fragments of his sanity scattered like pieces of a broken mirror. Emily knelt beside him, her face blurred and distant. "Jonathan, hold on. We did it. We stopped them." He nodded weakly, but he knew the battle was far from over. The true nature of SCP-001 was still out there, an ever-present threat that loomed over them. And as he slipped into unconsciousness, he couldn't shake the feeling that they had only delayed the inevitable. The descent into madness had begun, and the road ahead was dark and uncertain. But they had taken a stand, and for now, that was enough. Jonathan awoke to a pounding headache and the sterile hum of fluorescent lights. His mind felt like a jigsaw puzzle with pieces forcibly rearranged. The memories of their confrontation with the O5 Council were fragmented, yet the sense of urgency remained. He pushed himself up from the cot in the infirmary, wincing as the light stabbed at his eyes. Emily Carter stood nearby, her face etched with worry. "How are you feeling?" she asked, her voice soft but edged with concern. Harker rubbed his temples, trying to dispel the lingering fog. Like I've been through a meat grinder. What happened? We managed to disable Project Ouroboros. At least temporarily, she replied. But the Council's response was severe. They've tightened security and started a witch hunt for anyone involved in our little rebellion. The words hung in the air, heavy with implications. Harker knew that their actions had only scratched the surface of the Foundation's secrets. The knowledge they sought was deeper, more insidious. We need to keep going, he said, swinging his legs over the side of the cot. There's more to uncover. We have to understand SCP-001 completely, if we're going to stop this. Emily nodded. I've been doing some digging while you were out. There's a section in the archives, even deeper than where we've been. It's called the Forbidden Library. It's where they keep the most dangerous knowledge, things even the Council fears. Harker's pulse quickened. Then that's where we need to go. The path to the Forbidden Library was fraught with danger. The increased security measures meant they had to be more cautious than ever. They moved through the facility like shadows, avoiding patrols and surveillance cameras. Harker's heart pounded with a mixture of fear and determination. When they finally reached the entrance, a massive, ornate door reinforced with layers of steel and complex locking mechanisms, Harker felt a shiver of anticipation. Emily worked quickly, her skills in hacking and lockpicking coming to the forefront. After what felt like an eternity, the door creaked open, revealing a dimly lit chamber filled with ancient tomes, scrolls, and artifacts. The air inside was cold and still, as if untouched by time. The shelves were lined with books bound in leather and metal, their spines marked with symbols Harker could barely comprehend. The atmosphere was thick with an almost tangible weight, a sense of forbidden knowledge that defied understanding. "This place gives me the creeps," Emily whispered, her breath visible in the frigid air. Harker nodded, his eyes scanning the shelves. "We're looking for anything on SCP-001. There has to be something here that the Council didn't want anyone to find." They split up, carefully sifting through the tomes and scrolls. Harker's fingers brushed over ancient texts, their pages brittle with age. He could feel the knowledge within them, pulsing with a dark energy. It wasn't long before he found a journal, its cover marked with the same symbols they had seen in the abandoned wing. "Emily, over here," he called, his voice barely above a whisper. She joined him, peering over his shoulder as he opened the journal. The handwriting was neat but hurried, the words spilling across the pages in a frantic scrawl. The author spoke of a primordial entity, a force of chaos and destruction that predated the universe itself. This entity was SCP-001, and its containment was the Foundation's ultimate purpose. "The entity is bound by knowledge," the journal read. "The more we understand, the tighter the bindings. But ignorance is the key to its escape. We must walk the razor's edge, knowing enough to contain but not enough to release." Harker's mind raced. The implications were staggering. The Foundation's purpose was to balance on a knife's edge, containing the entity through a delicate interplay of knowledge and ignorance. Too much understanding, and they risked breaking the very bonds that held SCP-001 in check. "There's more," Emily said, pointing to a passage further down. "The Founders discovered that the entity feeds on reality itself. The anomalies we contain are its manifestations, fractures in the fabric of existence." Harker felt a chill run down his spine. The anomalies weren't just random occurrences, they were the symptoms of SCP-001's influence. The Foundation was a massive containment field, its protocols designed to manage these fractures and prevent the entity's escape. "We need to get this information out," Harker said, closing the journal. "The Council is playing a dangerous game, and they need to be stopped." As they prepared to leave, the door to the library creaked open, and a figure stepped inside. Harker's heart leaped into his throat as he recognized 051. The Council member's eyes were cold, filled with a mixture of anger and disdain. "You've gone too far, Dr. Harker," 051 said, his voice echoing in the chamber. The knowledge you seek is forbidden for a reason. You're meddling with forces beyond your comprehension. Harker stood his ground, the journal clutched tightly in his hand. We have to stop this. You're risking everything. 051's gaze hardened. You've already lost, Harker. The only question now is how much more you're willing to sacrifice. The room seemed to close in around them, the air thick with the weight of forbidden knowledge. Harker knew they were outmatched, but he also knew they couldn't give up. The truth about SCP-001 was too important, too dangerous to remain hidden. With a final glance at Emily, he steeled himself for the confrontation. They had come this far, and there was no turning back. The fate of the Foundation, and perhaps reality itself, hung in the balance. Dr. Harker stood in the frigid air of the Forbidden Library, clutching the ancient journal that held the secrets of SCP-001. Across from him, 051's gaze was cold and calculating. The dim light cast long shadows, amplifying the tension that crackled in the room. You think you can stop us, Harker? 051's voice was icy. You're tampering with forces beyond your understanding. The balance we maintain is delicate, and your interference threatens to undo everything. Harker squared his shoulders, the weight of the journal heavy in his hands. The balance you speak of is a lie. You're playing a game with reality itself, and if you lose, we all lose. The entity feeds on our ignorance, and you're feeding it. Emily Carter stood beside Harker, her expression fierce and determined. We've seen the evidence. We know about Project Ouroboros. Your manipulations are putting everyone at risk. This has to stop. 051's eyes flicked to Emily, then back to Harker. You think you've uncovered the truth. You've barely scratched the surface. The Foundation's very existence is a testament to our control. Without us, the world would fall into chaos. Without you, Harker retorted, the world might have a chance to survive. You're the ones who brought us to the brink. The room seemed to pulse with a malevolent energy. 051's lips curled into a thin smile. You have no idea what you're dealing with. But if you insist on pursuing this folly, then you leave us no choice. Before Harker could react, 051 raised his hand, signaling hidden guards to emerge from the shadows. They moved with military precision, surrounding Harker and Emily, their weapons trained on them. Emily's eyes darted around, assessing their chances. We can't fight them all, she whispered. Harker nodded, his mind racing. They were outnumbered and outgunned, but surrender was not an option. He looked at 051, his resolve hardening. We're not backing down. The truth will come out one way or another. 051 stepped closer, his expression unreadable. Then you leave us no choice. Take them. The guards moved in, but before they could lay hands on Harker and Emily, a blinding flash of light filled the room. Harker shielded his eyes, the sudden brilliance disorienting. When the light faded, the guards were gone, replaced by a figure Harker recognized immediately, Dr. Marcus Hale. Hale, Harker's voice was a mix of relief and confusion. How did you? No time to explain, Hale interrupted, his voice urgent. We need to get out of here, now. Emily didn't hesitate, grabbing Harker's arm and pulling him towards the exit. Hale led the way, his knowledge of the facility's secret passages proving invaluable. They moved quickly, the sounds of pursuit echoing in the distance. As they rounded a corner, Hale stopped, turning to face them. Listen, there's a safe room not far from here. We can regroup and figure out our next move. Harker nodded, his mind still reeling from the rapid turn of events. They followed Hale through a series of winding corridors, finally arriving at a reinforced door. Hale entered a code, and the door slid open, revealing a small, secure room filled with communication equipment and supplies. Once inside, Harker took a deep breath, trying to steady his nerves. Thank you, Hale. You saved us back there. Hale nodded, his expression grim. We're not out of the woods yet. The Council will stop at nothing to silence us. Emily paced the room, her frustration palpable. We need a plan. We can't keep running forever. Harker agreed, his mind racing with possibilities. We need to expose the council, make the truth public. If we can get this information out, they won't be able to hide behind their secrecy. Hale frowned. That's easier said than done. The council controls all communication channels. We'd need a secure way to broadcast the information, and even then, there's no guarantee people will believe us. Emily stopped pacing, a thoughtful look on her face. What about the anomalies? If we can find a way to use them, show people what's really going on, it might be enough to turn the tide. Harker considered this. The anomalies were dangerous, unpredictable, but they were also the key to understanding SCP-001. If they could harness their power, it might be enough to expose the council and force a change. It's risky, he said slowly. But it might be our only chance. We need to find an anomaly that can help us, something we can control and use to our advantage. Hale nodded. I know of one that might work. It's risky, but if we can secure it, it could be the proof we need. As they finalized their plan, Harker felt a renewed sense of purpose. The path ahead was fraught with danger, but they had come too far to turn back now. The fate of the Foundation, and perhaps reality itself, hung in the balance. They had to succeed. Failure was not an option. The confrontation was only the beginning. The true battle lay ahead, and Harker knew they would need every ounce of courage and cunning to prevail. But for now they had a plan, and that was enough to keep the flickering flame of hope alive. The descent into the depths of Site-19 felt like stepping into another world. The corridors twisted in ways that defied logic, the walls shimmering with an unearthly glow. Jonathan led the way, his flashlight cutting through the surreal landscape. Behind him, Emily Carter and Dr. Marcus Hale moved with a mixture of determination and trepidation. We're close, Hale whispered, his voice barely audible over the hum of reality itself bending around them. The anomaly should be just ahead. Harker nodded, his mind grappling with the strange visions that flickered at the edges of his consciousness. Faces from his past, places he had never seen, all blending into a chaotic tapestry. The further they went, the harder it became to distinguish between reality and illusion. They reached a massive door, its surface covered in intricate symbols that seemed to writhe and pulse. Hale approached the control panel, entering a series of codes. The door groaned open, revealing a chamber bathed in an eerie, pulsating light. In the center of the room floated a sphere of shifting, iridescent colors, SCP-0732, an anomaly known for its ability to manipulate perceptions of reality. Harker felt a pull, a connection to the sphere that was both mesmerizing and terrifying. This is it, Hale said, his voice tinged with awe. If we can harness its power, we can expose the Council's lies. Emily stepped forward, her face illuminated by the sphere's glow. How do we control it? Hale produced a device from his bag, a small, handheld unit with a series of dials and switches. This should interface with the sphere, allowing us to focus its power. But it's experimental, untested. Harker took the device, feeling its weight in his hand. We don't have a choice. We need to try. As he approached the sphere, the air around him seemed to thicken, each step a struggle against an invisible force. He raised the device, aiming it at the sphere, and activated it. The sphere's light intensified, filling the room with a blinding radiance. Suddenly, Harker found himself standing in the middle of a vast, desolate landscape. The sky above was a swirling mass of storm clouds, and the ground beneath him was cracked and barren. He turned, seeing Emily and Hale beside him, their faces reflecting the same confusion and fear he felt. "Where are we?" Emily asked, her voice trembling. Hale looked around, his eyes wide. "We're inside the anomaly. This is its reality." Harker felt a chill run down his spine. The landscape was eerily silent, devoid of life. The only sound was the distant rumble of thunder. He turned to Hale. "How do we get out?" Hale adjusted the device, his fingers moving with a desperate urgency. "We need to find a way to anchor ourselves back to our reality. The sphere's power is warping our perceptions." As they moved through the desolate landscape, the ground began to shift and change, transforming into scenes from their memories. Harker saw his childhood home, his university, and the halls of Site-19, all blending together in a disorienting mix. "This isn't real," he muttered, trying to focus. "We need to stay together, stay grounded." They continued walking, the landscape shifting around them. Harker felt a growing sense of dread, as if something was watching them from the shadows. He glanced at Emily, who was clutching a photograph of her family, her face pale and drawn. "We need to focus on what's real," Harker said, his voice steady. "We can't let the anomaly break us." Suddenly the ground beneath them cracked open, and they found themselves falling into darkness. Harker's mind reeled, the sensation of falling stretching into eternity. When he finally landed, he was back in the chamber, the sphere's light dimming. He gasped for breath, his body trembling. Emily and Hale were beside him, looking equally shaken. The device in Harker's hand was sparking, the dials spinning wildly. "We did it," Hale said, his voice weak. "We're back." Harker looked at the sphere, now dark and inert. "We need to use this," he said, his voice filled with resolve. "We need to show the world what's really happening." They gathered their strength and prepared to leave the chamber. The journey back through the twisted corridors felt like a march through a dream. Harker's mind was filled with the visions they had seen, the reality they had touched. As they emerged into the main part of Site-19, the atmosphere had changed. The facility was on high alert, guards and personnel moving with a sense of urgency and fear. Harker knew that the council would stop at nothing to silence them. "We need to broadcast this," Emily said, her voice determined. "We need to reach out to every corner of the Foundation, to the public." Hale nodded. "There's a secure broadcast room not far from here. We can use it to send the signal." They moved quickly, avoiding detection as they made their way to the broadcast room. Harker's mind was a whirlwind of thoughts, the images from the anomaly still vivid. They had seen the truth, the reality behind the Foundation's facade. As they entered the broadcast room, Harker felt a surge of hope. They had a chance to make a difference, to expose the lies and manipulations of the Council. They activated the equipment, preparing to send their message. "This is it," Harker said, looking at Emily and Hale. "We're about to change everything." The screen flickered to life, and Harker began to speak, his voice strong and unwavering. "This is Dr. Harker. We have uncovered the truth about SCP-001 and the manipulations of the O5 Council. The Foundation's very existence is a lie, a containment measure for a primordial entity that threatens our reality. We cannot remain silent. The world must know the truth." As his message broadcasted, Harker felt a sense of purpose and resolve. They had faced the anomalies, the twisted reality, and emerged stronger. The battle was far from over, but they had taken the first step. The truth was out there, and they would fight to ensure it was heard. The anomalous reality they had glimpsed was a reminder of the stakes, the fragile balance they sought to protect. And as they stood together, Harker knew they had the strength to face whatever came next. The broadcast had gone out. Dr. Harker stood in the now silent room, his heart pounding. They had done it. They had exposed the truth. But as the initial surge of triumph faded, the reality of their situation set in. The walls of Site-19 seemed to close in, the weight of their actions pressing down on him. Emily Carter and Dr. Marcus Hale were already moving, securing the doors and checking the equipment. The broadcast room felt like a fragile sanctuary amidst the chaos that was sure to follow. Harker, we need to move, Emily said urgently. The council won't sit idly by. They'll come for us. Harker nodded, his mind racing. We need to get to the command center. If we can secure it, we can control the site's security systems and buy ourselves some time. They left the broadcast room, moving quickly through the corridors. The facility was in disarray, alarms blaring and personnel rushing to respond to the crisis. The atmosphere was electric with panic and confusion. Harker's sense of urgency grew with each step. As they approached the command center, they encountered a squad of guards. Hale stepped forward, his hands raised in a placating gesture. We're on your side, he said quickly. We need to secure the command center. The council is trying to destroy the Foundation from within. The guards hesitated, their expressions conflicted. The chaos of the broadcast had sown doubt, and Harker could see it in their eyes. One of the guards, a young man with a determined look, stepped forward. We've heard the broadcast. If what you're saying is true, we need to act now. With the guards on their side, they pushed forward, reaching the command center. The room was a hive of activity, screens displaying various parts of the facility, alarms flashing red. Harker took a deep breath and addressed the room. Everyone, listen up. The O5 Council is compromised. They've been manipulating the anomalies for their own ends. We need to take control of the site and contain this situation. The personnel looked at him, some skeptical, others hopeful. Emily moved to the central console, starting to lock down the security systems. Hale coordinated with the guards, organizing a defense against any council loyalists who might try to retake the command center. As the command center fell under their control, Harker felt a momentary relief. But it was short-lived. A sudden, violent tremor shook the facility, throwing people off their feet and sending equipment crashing to the ground. Harker grabbed a console for support, his eyes widening in alarm. What was that? Emily shouted, her fingers flying over the console as she tried to make sense of the data streaming in. Hale looked at the monitors, his face pale. It's SCP-001. The entity is reacting to the disruption. The very fabric of reality is starting to fray. Harker's mind raced. They had known that exposing the truth would have consequences, but this was beyond anything they had anticipated. The anomalies contained within Site-19 were manifestations of SCP-001's influence, and now that influence was tearing through the containment protocols. We need to stabilize the anomalies, Harker said urgently. If we don't, the entire facility will collapse. Emily nodded, her focus intense. I'm rerouting power to the primary containment grid, but it's not going to hold for long. We need to manually reinforce the containment fields. Harker and Hale moved through the command center, coordinating teams to manually stabilize the anomalies. The facility continued to shake, the very walls seeming to warp and twist under the strain. Harker could feel the pressure building, the air thick with the sense of impending catastrophe. As they worked, Harker's thoughts turned to the larger picture. The Foundation itself was an anomaly, a containment measure for something beyond comprehension. If Site-19 fell, the entire world could be at risk. We need to think bigger, he said, turning to Hale. We can't just stabilize the anomalies. We need to find a way to contain SCP-001's influence on a global scale. Hale's eyes widened. You're talking about reconfiguring the entire containment network. That's almost impossible. Almost, Harker replied, his determination hardening into resolve. But we have to try. We need to use the Foundation's resources to create a global containment field, something that can hold SCP-001 at bay. Emily looked up from the console, her face set with determination. We can use the satellites. The Foundation's network is extensive enough. If we can synchronize the containment fields, we might just pull it off. Harker nodded. Let's do it. They worked with feverish intensity, coordinating with other Foundation sites, rerouting power, and configuring the satellite network. The facility continued to shake, each tremor a reminder of the stakes. Harker could feel the strain on his body and mind, but he pushed through, driven by the knowledge that failure was not an option. As they neared completion, a final, massive tremor rocked the facility. Harker stumbled, catching himself on the console. "We're out of time," he said, his voice hoarse. Emily hit the switch. Emily's hand hovered over the control, her eyes meeting Harker's. She nodded and activated the global containment field. The facility shuddered, the air crackling with energy as the satellites synchronized, creating a vast network of containment fields. For a moment, everything was still. Harker held his breath, the tension almost unbearable. Then, slowly, the tremors subsided. The walls stopped warping, and the anomalies began to stabilize. "We did it," Hale said, his voice filled with relief and awe. "We actually did it." Harker allowed himself a moment of triumph. They had managed to contain SCP-001's influence, at least for now. But he knew that the battle was far from over. The Council was still out there, and the truth about the Foundation was now known. "We need to regroup," Harker said, his voice steady. "This isn't the end. It's just the beginning of a new fight." Emily and Hale nodded, their faces set with determination. They had faced the collapse and emerged stronger. Together they would continue to fight, to protect the world from the anomalies and the manipulations of those who sought to control them. The road ahead was uncertain, but Harker felt a renewed sense of purpose. They had faced the collapse of reality itself and had stood firm. And as long as they stood together, they would face whatever came next. The true test of their resolve was yet to come, but they were ready. The collapse had been a trial by fire, and they had emerged stronger, more determined than ever to protect the world from the forces that threatened it. Dr. Harker stood at the heart of Site-19, the command center's screens flickering with status reports from across the globe. The air was thick with the aftermath of their desperate actions to stabilize the anomalies and contain SCP-001's influence. His body ached with exhaustion, but his mind was sharp, focused on the task ahead. Emily Carter and Dr. Marcus Hale were at his side, their faces drawn with fatigue but resolute. They had managed to avert the immediate crisis, but the threat was far from over. The O5 Council's betrayal, the anomalies, and SCP-001 itself still loomed large. "We need to debrief," Hale said, his voice steady but tired. "There's still so much we don't understand about SCP-001 and the Council's true agenda." Harker nodded, his eyes scanning the room. The personnel who had rallied to their cause looked back at him, their expressions a mix of hope and determination. They had faced the unimaginable and survived. Now it was time to confront the deeper truths. "Everyone, gather around," Harker called out, drawing the attention of the room. "We've stabilized the anomalies for now, but we're not done. We need to understand the true nature of SCP-001 and what the Council was really trying to achieve with Project Ouroboros." Emily stepped forward, holding the journal they had retrieved from the Forbidden Library. "This journal contains some of the answers," she said, her voice carrying across the room. "It describes SCP-001 as a primordial entity, a force of chaos and destruction that predates our universe. The Foundation was created to contain it, but the Council's actions suggest they had other plans." Harker took the journal, feeling its weight in his hands. "The entity is bound by knowledge and ignorance," he said, summarizing their earlier findings. "Too much understanding or too little can break the bonds that hold it. The Council was trying to harness its power, risking everything in the process." The room was silent, the implications sinking in. Harker felt a sense of resolve harden within him. "We need to confront the Council, expose their actions, and ensure that SCP-001 remains contained. But we also need to reform the Foundation, make sure it truly serves its purpose." As they began to formulate their plan, a soft chime echoed through the command center. A secure communication line was opening. Harker's heart skipped a beat as the screen flickered, revealing the stern visage of 051. "You've meddled in things beyond your comprehension," 051 said, his voice cold and authoritative. "The Foundation's mission is delicate, and your actions have endangered us all." Harker stepped forward, his voice firm. "Your manipulations have endangered us all. You've been using the anomalies for your own ends, risking the very fabric of reality. We won't stand by and let you destroy everything we've fought to protect." 051's eyes narrowed. "You think you've uncovered the truth? You've only seen fragments. The full reality of SCP-001 is beyond your understanding. But you've forced our hand. We cannot allow your insurrection to continue." Before Harker could respond, the screen went dark. Alarms began to blare once more, and the room's lighting shifted to a harsh red. Hale checked the consoles, his expression grim. "They've initiated a lockdown. We're cut off from the outside world." Emily's face was set with determination. "We need to override the lockdown, reach the other sites, and rally our allies. We can't let the Council silence us." Harker nodded, his mind racing. "We'll split into teams. Emily, you and Hale work on the override. I'll coordinate with our forces here to secure the facility and prepare for a counterattack." As they moved into action, Harker felt a strange sense of calm. They had faced the collapse and emerged stronger. Now they were united in purpose, ready to confront the final challenge. Hours passed in a blur of activity. The sound of gunfire echoed through the corridors as loyalist forces clashed with those who had joined Harker's cause. Harker moved from one crisis to another, his focus unwavering. Finally, Emily's voice crackled over the intercom. "We've overridden the lockdown. We have control of the facility's communications." Harker breathed a sigh of relief. "Good work. Broadcast the truth to all Foundation sites. Let them know what's really happening." As the message went out, Harker felt a shift in the air. The tide was turning. Reports came in from other sites, personnel rallying to their cause, the Council's grip weakening. But as they celebrated this small victory, a new alarm sounded. Harker turned to the monitors, his heart sinking. The containment fields were failing again, SCP-001's influence growing stronger. Emily's face appeared on the screen, her expression grave. "Jonathan, we need to stabilize the fields, but it's worse than before. The entity is pushing back, harder than ever." Harker nodded, his mind racing. "We'll have to do it manually. Hale, gather a team. We're going to reinforce the fields ourselves." They moved quickly, descending into the depths of Site 19 once more. The air grew colder, the walls seeming to pulse with an unearthly energy. Harker could feel the pressure building, the entity's presence growing stronger. As they reached the containment chamber, Harker took a deep breath. The room was filled with a shimmering, malevolent light. They had to act fast. "Emily, start the sequence," he ordered. "Hale, get the field generators online." They worked in unison, the air crackling with energy as they activated the generators and reinforced the containment fields. Harker felt a surge of determination, his focus sharpening to a razor's edge. But as they worked, the entity pushed back. The room shook, the light intensifying. Harker could feel his mind straining, the edges of his sanity fraying. He glanced at Emily, seeing the same struggle in her eyes. "We can do this," he said, his voice steady. "We have to." With a final, desperate effort, they activated the last generator. The room filled with a blinding light, the air humming with power. Harker felt the pressure ease, the entity's presence receding. They had done it. The fields were stabilized, the entity contained once more. Harker sank to his knees, the exhaustion finally catching up with him. Emily and Hale joined him. their faces etched with relief and triumph. "We did it," Emily said, her voice barely above a whisper. Harker nodded, a weary smile on his lips. "We did. But the fight isn't over. We need to rebuild, reform the Foundation, and ensure this never happens again." As they made their way back to the command center, Harker felt a renewed sense of purpose. They had faced the darkness and emerged stronger. The Foundation would need to change, to adapt, but they would do it together. The final revelation had been a trial by fire, a test of their resolve. And they had passed. The future was uncertain, but they were ready to face it, united in their mission to protect the world from the unimaginable. The path ahead was long and fraught with challenges, but Harker knew they would prevail. They had seen the face of chaos and had not faltered. And as long as they stood together, they would continue to protect, to contain, and to secure the world from the forces that sought to tear it apart.